Hello, everybody. Hello. Thanks for joining me again this evening. This evening, I didn't really have a topic to talk about, so I just left it on the community tab. What people wanted me to cover. There's been quite a few suggestions. What I noticed about a lot of them, all in different ways, they all seem to be looking at the same kind of thing. So I kind of summed that up. I'm just going to call it, as I called the live stream, trying to keep a sense of yourself in the midst of chaos. The things that are going on, people crossing your boundaries, over explaining ourselves, things like that, trying to keep a sense of ourself. There were a few other questions that came up. I have made videos on them, but I will touch on them briefly. First of all, someone asked about entitlement. Now, I'm assuming that this is about narcissism and narcissistic people and their huge inflated sense of entitlement. I did make a video on that previously. You will find it somewhere in my videos on the list. Um, but entitlement is something we all have a sense of entitlement to some degree. For instance, if you enter a race, you're the one that wins the race, you're entitled to get the trophy, get the medal, don't hand it to someone else. So we do have a sense of entitlement. Narcissistic people, however, it's inflated, it's false, it's exaggerated. They believe they would deserve the medal for just turning up. They don't even really have to enter the race. So believing themselves to be special, unique, superior, they're the most virtuous person, the funniest person, the most intelligent, or they might be the most wounded, the most victimized, whatever. They believe that gives them this huge inflated sense of entitlement. So I would say if you want to have a look at the video, I do outline the entitlement in a lot more detail. Someone else had asked about flying monkeys. Sometimes they're called enablers, they're called supporters, called agents. But the term flying monkey, that comes from the Wizard of Oz movie, those creepy little critters with the waistcoats and the hats and stuff, that kidnap Dorothy. They carry out the witch's bidding. Um, but looking at the agents, the flying monkeys, there are different kinds and there's for different reasons. There's never really a one size fits all. I think if memory serves, when I was talking about them, I think I broke it into three parts. But you would have flying monkeys, you would have agents who are naive. They don't know the full picture. So they're only really going by what they've been told. They could be led to believe, for instance, that this narcissistic person is genuinely concerned about you and they want to know how you are. They're worried about you. So they're feeding them information back or they're trying to get information for them. Then you would get those who are probably every bit as toxic. They love to see the chaos. They love to see the drama, things like that. So they like to see that narcissistic person's victim in some kind of distress. They're kind of feeding off it too. Then you might get those who are afraid. They're terrified. They maybe lack assertiveness or something, but they would maybe be afraid that if they don't do what that narcissistic person tells them to do, then all that wrath, all that vitriol, all that vindictiveness is going to be turned on them. So there are different kinds of flying monkey, and there's many different motivations for it. But as I say, there are three videos, I believe, broke into three parts. Yes, I did. Different types, motivations behind it, and lastly was how to deal with them. So if you have a look, you'll find those. Hope you find them helpful. And someone had asked about dissociation. And dissociation, like short-term memory gaps, things like that, following narcissistic abuse. Well, it's actually quite common, and it's an interesting question. It's something that doesn't really come up a lot. But where there's been like psychological abuse, manipulation, things like that, dissociation can be quite common. It's like it's part of the brain's defense mechanisms, and it's protects us from overwhelming stress and trauma and things like that. So there might be little things like memory gaps, missing pieces of time. Sometimes we just lose concentration. I suppose the way I would describe it is like you're on your journey home from work or the shop or whatever. You reach your front door and you can't really remember your journey. It's like your mind was wandering. That is a form of dissociation. But if you think of it in terms of a defense mechanism, There can be little brief moments of amnesia, disconnection from reality, and things like that. There can even be like an emotional numbing can take place. But it's not a sign of weakness. It's your mind's attempt to protect you from feeling overwhelmed and so on. I did do a video on dissociation, the different kinds of dissociation. I'm not sure if I covered that part in it, but the video should give you a bit more information on the reasons behind dissociation and so on. Things like therapy and so on can help addressing the root causes of it and looking at ways to cope a bit better. Someone had asked, and I thought this was a really good question, about the difference between estrangement and alienation. They were talking in the context of children, adult children. I thought that was an interesting question because the two terms are often used interchangeably. They're not quite the same thing. Estrangement usually comes because one or both people have voluntarily, for whatever reasons, they've come to this decision um, to reduce contact, to cut off contact or whatever. The relationship might not necessarily be frayed or whatever, but the connection isn't quite as strong as it once was. There is the potential for things like reconciliation because then one person or both parties can come to some kind of decision to try to improve the relationship. Alienation is different in the sense that it usually involves a third party. It's a form of manipulation. So there's like an influence being placed on someone. There could be gossiping, things like that. There could be, hold on a second, I've just noticed something, so I'm going to turn this off because I don't want it making noises while I'm talking. I'm already unprofessional and haphazard. I don't want to sound any worse. What do you get to? So yeah, it's a form of manipulation. There could be gossiping and so on. There could be bad mouthing. Or there could be showing anger, distress, things like that. Whenever the victim, if you want to call them, whenever they appear, they behave in such a way, and that is going to bring up a reaction in the person. So it's a form of control, coercion, and it's looking at, I suppose, the power dynamics within that. If it's three people, we'll call it a triad. The different power dynamics within that trio. The reconciliation might be a little bit challenging if that negative influence is still there, but it is not impossible. And what I can't do is I can't give specific advice because, again, I don't. First of all, I'm not the only advice I ever give is don't ask me for advice. But all situations are different. All relationships can be different. But what I think can be helpful is when we just try to be authentic and genuine. We show the honest version of ourselves, the best version of ourselves that we can. And over time, that person who's been alienated from us, over time, they might get to see the real us and things can change that way. They might realize they've been lied to or whatever. When it comes to part of the question was about dealing with other people who don't believe it, who might be questioning, who think you're the problem. Well, again, it's a difficult one to answer, but first thing I would think of would be, well, who are these people and why are they important? I mean, this thing, everybody has an opinion. How important is their opinion to you? I know it doesn't sit well whenever people see us in a very negative way, probably a way that's not true. That doesn't sit well at all. But depending on who the person is, are we really under any obligation to explain ourselves? Maybe we could give an account of ourselves, but we don't necessarily have to over defend ourselves and blame others and things like that. Sometimes, if you want to go back to what we were talking about with the flying monkeys, um, the more we over defend ourselves, the more frustrated we get and more distressed we get. That could be getting fed back to the person who's been causing all this. So, if you are going to explain yourself, I mean, that's entirely up to you. But I mean, ask yourself: would the person you're talking to, if you know them, would they be open to new information? Do they really genuinely want answers, or are they just trying to further the division? That's entirely up to you. But I'm not sure if I covered that. I did do a video on alienation, but I was looking at younger children. Um, Some of it, I imagine, would apply to older kids as well, about the different types of alienation, the different degrees to it. I did a video on co-parenting with a narcissistic ex-parent. There might be something in that you would find useful as well. And someone had asked about how to know whether or not someone is safe. And I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Safe as in there's some kind of danger, they're in some kind of danger, or safe as in they're not another abusive person. Well, that's, I suppose, how would you recognize if someone's going to be abusive and narcissistic and so on? Not at first, and not easily, I would say. What we often look for are repeated patterns of behavior, because someone could lose their temper. That does not mean they're some kind of mad, crazy psychopath. They could have lost their temper because, I don't know, they've been suppressing things for so long. We did something to annoy them. They might not even be angry with us. They could be angry with someone else. They could just be having a bad day. That's not a sign they're a bad person. If they're continually losing their temper, if they're continually having temper tantrums, having rage fits and things like that, maybe that's something to look out for. So what you're looking for are repeated patterns of behavior. So some repeated patterns of behavior would be things like controlling behavior. They try to dominate discussions, decisions, things like that. They're trying to monitor your actions, checking up on where you are, things like that. Not that you're curious, not that they're worried, not things like that, but no, this is, well, they might exaggerate that's what's behind it, but they're continually controlling. There could be a disrespect for your boundaries. There could be, and I'm going to talk about boundaries later on, but there could be a disrespect for your boundaries. If they don't keep crossing them, they keep testing them to see how far they can get. I think a sign, it's not a sign it's often discussed, and it's a difficult one because the thing is, some people can fall for people very, very quickly. We can fall in love very, very quickly. If you listen to all the love songs you dance to, apparently. But another sign could be somebody wants to move things very, very quickly. It's like you've had 2 dates, maybe 3, and they're talking about moving in or whatever. But they want things to move very quickly. Probably, or not probably, they want to move things very quickly, more quickly than perhaps you're comfortable with, and they won't take no for an answer. Okay, they just keep going. Even if you say no, let's wait a while, let's see how things go, let's get to know each other. It's like they continually push the agenda. So that could be a sign. Another sign could be dishonesty. Now, I'm not talking about little white lies here or anything like that. Dishonesty, there's an inconsistency between things like their words and their actions. Some of their stories contradict each other. That could be a sign as well. Talking a lot about their ex, about how their ex maybe cheated on them and stuff like that. That could be a sign that this person, not saying that didn't happen, because it could well have happened and they could well be hurting, but it could also be, if you will, they're telegraphing in advance that they are going to be very jealous and very possessive. And they want to know your every move. They want access to your Facebook, your Twitter, and stuff like that, or X, sorry, whatever they call it. They want access to your social media. They want to read your messages. They want to know where you are at all times. So there could be a lot of jealousy and possessiveness. And talking about how they've been hurt in the past, at first isn't always easy to discern, because they could genuinely really have been hurt. But that could be telegraphing how they're going to behave in the future. And I suppose just on that, if they have not just their last partner was a monster or whatever, but if there is a pattern of unhealthy relationships, it's like they don't seem to get on with anybody. They don't like their next door neighbor. They don't like their boss. They don't like the people they work with. They don't like their ex. Every one of their exes was a horrible monster. Whatever it is, there's a history and there's a pattern of unhealthy, bad relationships, and they badmouth everybody. So somebody doing or saying something once in a while is not necessarily a sign, but when these things continue, that can be a sign of maybe what's to come. So Getting back, going to have a quick drink. So getting back to the topic at hand, trying to keep a sense of ourself. I thought it was interesting. A question came up about someone was asking about how we learn to trust ourselves again. Well, the thing about trusting ourselves is remembering that if you were in a relationship or an environment or a situation and there were people there who were abusive, coercive, and things like that, you probably find your confidence has been eroded away. So I'm kind of trying to figure out what you mean by the question about trusting ourselves. I'm looking at it from the context of confidence. It's how do we get our sense of confidence back, trusting our intuition, our sense of self-worth, having a healthy level of self-doubt, because without it, I suppose we're just arrogant, but having a healthy level of self-doubt rather than constantly second guessing ourselves and assuming the worst about ourselves. Now, there are different ways of doing this, and in order to learn to trust ourselves, it could well be like a lot of things. It could be a slow process, but it could be a worthwhile one. First thing I would say is you recognize the impact that that had on you. Not necessarily all the bad things that happened to me and how miserable and sad and in pain I am, but recognize the impact to the point where you are maybe second guessing yourselves. You're questioning your own sense of worth. You're you're scanning the room, looking for disapproval and things like that. You recognize maybe you're finding it harder to stand up for yourself. So you have to look at the ways this has impacted you. Be honest with yourself. When you're doing that, what you're doing is you're starting to build on your awareness again. Um, you're rebuilding, if you want to call it, your self-awareness. There are different ways of doing that. I've talked about it before, but journaling can help, mood diaries, things like that. Um, looking at things like our past decisions, um, focus on what we learned from them, not necessarily always what went well and what went badly, because we do learn from both. But we have to look at what we learned from past decisions. And again, going back to recognizing the impact, you may have been in a situation with someone where what you did was with the best of intentions, but it never worked. So you have to recognize your reasons behind that, about how you wanted it to work, how you tried. There was nothing about you. You weren't wrong. You weren't dumb. You weren't stupid. You weren't any of those things. It may have come from a good place. What you might have found as well, where there was a lot of gaslighting, your own sense of reality, your own sense of yourself was eroded as well. Recognizing that that wasn't true. It's looking at challenging that narrative about you. Um, challenging that narrative. Another aspect of that I'm just thinking is reminding yourself that being manipulated, being lied to is not a reflection on you as a person. It's a reflection on them. Okay. I always say there's no shame in having been on the wrong end of a toxic person. Um, it's all their behavior. It's not a reflection on your intelligence either, or your character or anything like that. So that's what I say about looking at the impact of it, challenging the narrative. What you're doing is you're rebuilding your self-awareness. What you can do as well is, in order to start trusting yourself, is you start to live in defiance. You start to take little small risks, little small things, little small steps. You do things in your own best interest. You do things and you learn from what works as much as what doesn't work. You give yourself permission to change your mind. You might want to try something new, learn a new skill, whatever it is. You start setting little small goals. You practice things like self-compassion rather than harsh self-criticism. Yeah, that inner critic that we have, if you will, what that really is, are all the negative feedback that we might have got in that situation. Each and every time we go to do something, it's, yeah, but this isn't going to work, or I'm being selfish for this, or whatever. We need to learn to challenge that. So, as I say, we're living in defiance. And you focus on the growth. A lot of the time, we focus on things that have went wrong, and we're judging ourselves harshly. We're criticizing ourselves. We're focusing on our pain, but what we don't do is we don't focus on the little small victories. We don't focus on the things that maybe we've started to improve at. So we start to look at those little things as well. And if we make a mistake, if we get it wrong, again, we can still trust ourselves. We can be a bit more resilient than we're giving ourselves credit for. You might have been in that situation, that environment, wherever. So it doesn't matter what you did. You could have succeeded at something and there was something wrong with it. You know, it would have been undermined. It would have been devalued. Something went wrong for you. You failed at something, whatever, and that would have been used to beat you over the head or something about how stupid and useless you are and you shouldn't try things like that. Either way, you were going to be criticized. You need to start to undo that, and you undo that by, as I say, living in defiance and taking those little steps. Give yourself permission to get something wrong, but also give yourself permission to get it right. Give yourself a pat in the back once in a while. Get involved with other people. Form new healthy relationships with people who will celebrate your success. You celebrate their success as well. Notice how these things can be reciprocated. So, moving on to boundaries. Boundaries, this is the thing about our boundaries. What do I mean by boundaries? Well, there are different kinds of boundaries. There's physical boundaries, there's emotional boundaries, there's financial boundaries, lots of different kinds of boundaries. But in order to recognize our boundaries, I think you need to recognize, first of all, your limits. Okay, we only have so much capacity. You have to recognize your values as well. Okay, you're not being a bad person because you won't lie to cover up for somebody. Okay, you're not being a bad person for doing that. Nor are you being a bad person when they tell people that you will lie for them. You know, no, actually, I wasn't even there. I don't know why he's bringing me into this. So you know your limits, you know your values. You also know your needs. You have a sense of integrity, sense of self-respect, and you try to get a sense of what behaviors you are unwilling to tolerate. The difficulty is sometimes we don't know our boundaries until they're crossed. That being said, once they are crossed, we know what they are. So we have to be aware of them. Okay. If we're not really sure what they are and someone does cross them, we need to be able to articulate it clearly, concisely, honestly, assertively, and so on. What we don't do is we don't over explain ourselves or try to justify ourselves. The way I look at it is like this. If you imagine this, do you ever go into one of those shops or somebody has you on the phone and they've decided they're selling you something and they have decided you're going to buy it? And it doesn't matter what you say. You know, it doesn't matter. You can't afford it. You don't want it. You don't need it. They have decided you're going to buy it, and you pretty much have to explain to them why you're not. And everything you say to them, every obstacle you put up, they have something to undermine that. And you're left feeling as if there's something wrong with you for not wanting to buy it. And you end up walking out of the shop with this thing and you're thinking, what the hell did I buy this for? That's what it's like sometimes when we over explain ourselves, especially with a very manipulative person. Doesn't matter what we say, they will find a way to undermine it. So what we do is we just stick to the point and we're clear and we're concise. We don't need to over explain or over justify. As I often say, sometimes no is a complete sentence. Okay. I suppose if you're thinking of that salesperson as well, you just tell them you're not interested. And it doesn't matter what they come back with. You just repeat the same thing. I'm not interested. I'm still not interested. I'm not interested. Sooner or later, they're going, and you know what? You're not hurting their feelings. You might frustrate them, but you're not hurting their feelings because as soon as you're gone, they'll be on to the next person. Okay. They've forgotten you already. God, my mind does wander, doesn't it? So yeah, with that narcissistic person, we avoid over-explaining and justifying because the more information we give, just like that salesperson, the more information we give, the more that will be undermined. And we're left thinking there's something wrong with us. We're a bad person. You know, we end up just saying yes, we get ground down, in other words. Try to stay emotionally neutral if possible. I know it depends, I suppose, on the situation. But when we try to stay emotionally neutral, and we try to stay factual rather than emotive, the reason to say that is a lot of the times you could be with a very manipulative person, and a lot of the arguments are emotive. A lot of the things they do and say to get what they want are emotive. They're not based in reality, they're not based in facts. It's all based on how they feel. How can you say no to me? Look at the misery I'm in, or that's really unfair, or you're so selfish, and all that sort of thing. None of it's based in fact. They're all emotive. Try to stay emotionally neutral, especially if that person is trying to push you to get an emotional reaction. The emotional reaction could be what they're feeding off, or it could be something they use against you. The fact that you become frustrated, swear at them, raise your voice, whatever it is, that's proof that you're crazy. You're the crazy one. So try to be as calm and detached as you can. On that, I would say anticipate whenever you do have boundaries and a narcissistic person is there and they're trying to cross those boundaries. Why are we surprised when they do that? Every single time we're surprised when they do that. Uh, and yet it's a repeated pattern of behavior. So we anticipate when we say no to something, there is going to be some kind of pushback. Something that happens when people have been in long-term environments or situations like that, and someone is continually pushing their boundaries, and they're continually backing down and so on. Whenever someone is continually pushing their boundaries, what they might find is whenever they're talking to other people about it, whether it's a therapist or a friend or whoever it is, they're talking to someone about it, and that person might give them a bit of advice. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? And what they're doing is they're saying, yeah, but then they'll say this, or then they'll say that, or then they'll do the other thing. Again, it's like their brain has been hardwired. They know there is going to be some kind of pushback. They know that because that's generally what this person does. So you expect there to be some kind of a pushback. You expect some kind of resistance. There's going to be guilt tripping. There's going to be threats. There's going to be manipulation. Again, you try to stay calm. Try to avoid being drawn into a debate about it. Keep sticking to the point. If it's no, it's no. If it's why is it no, then just refer them to your previous answer. I've already explained this, whatever it is. And you need to be consistent as well. What I mean by being consistent is if you have a boundary, they're crossing it, you need to explain again why it's a boundary, without over explaining yourself. Sound like I'm contradicting myself. Without over explaining it, but why it's a boundary. And they keep on doing it. The person needs to be made aware that there are consequences. If they're made aware that there are consequences, the thing is we have to follow through with those consequences. And that's what I mean about being consistent. If we say to someone, try to think of an example. Okay, if you do that once more, that's it. There will be no. I'm not going with you on Friday night. Okay, and they do it. Now, what happens is we'll huff, we'll be angry. We won't do something else, but we still end up going on the Friday, and we think, well, I did still show them. Did show them how unhappy I was. To that narcissistic person, you didn't do what you said. You told them that you wouldn't go, and still you went on the Friday night. You showed them you didn't mean what you said. And whenever that happens, what you find is they see that as they see that as a green light. Now, the thing about setting boundaries is what I wouldn't say is you set the nuclear option. The nuclear option could be something like, that's it, I'm off, you'll never see me again. Depending on what it is, of course. But you set a boundary that there will be some kind of a consequence, whatever that is. Again, I won't go on the Friday night. When the Friday night comes, you make them aware. No, you were told, and I have told you I'm not going, and I've told you why I'm not going, and it's up to them. They have to huff, they have to do whatever. If they can't go by themselves, if they have to find someone else, whatever, that's entirely up to them. You made them aware. They're not going to be happy with it. It's the thing about consequences. I read this once. People generally don't like consequences, especially the negative ones. Positive ones are good. People don't like negative consequences, but everybody understands them. Not everybody wants to accept them. Again, everybody understands them. So it's about being consistent. If we say something, we have to mean it. We have to follow it through. So you set what's going to happen if the boundary is crossed and you follow through with it, but you also be prepared to enforce the consequences consistently. Because narcissistic people generally don't give up the first go. They will try another way to do the same thing. I always say, look at there is a difference between the change in a person and a change in a tactic. Learn to discern the difference. Okay. Sometimes we'll have to distance ourselves when we have to. Now, in extreme cases, that could be limiting contact, that could be going grey rock, that could even be going no contact. But sometimes we do have to distance ourselves somehow, usually emotionally distance ourselves. The other thing that can be helpful when it comes to setting our boundaries is to seek support. Some people will find therapy, counseling helpful to understand their boundaries and so on and learn to enforce them. Some people find things like life coaching helpful because that's really good for teaching things like communication, assertiveness, things like that. Sorry, I'm just getting comfy here. I'm an old man. I need to get comfy. Where did I get to? Yeah, so seek different kinds of support. People who have your back, people who understand the situation, people who know what's going on. Talk to them as well, because sometimes you can get a good little bit of advice from them if you need it. Let me see. What was I going to? I was talking about the boundaries. So that's looking at the boundaries, the different ways we can communicate them, enforce them, understanding what they are, and so on. Lastly, one of the questions came up was managing narcissistic in-laws at Christmas. Well, it's the thing about the holiday season. You know, everybody gets together. It's the season of goodwill and all that sort of thing. Unless you're a miserable old man like me and it's bah humbug, you know. No, it's not true. I like Christmas too. Looking at narcissistic in-laws, it would really depend, I guess. There's different ways you can do this, but it would really depend, I guess, on how to phrase this. Yeah, it's the partner. Is the partner aware of the behavior? Does the partner know the impact of the behavior, not just on you, but on them and so on? Sometimes you can have a partner that's quite enmeshed. There's you can have a partner who refuses to see it. They're very, very compliant, you know. Other times you will get a partner who will know they are difficult. So there are different ways of managing it. So if you have a partner and they are aware of the situation and they know what their family is like, try to, if you will, work as a team. How are you going to do this together? For instance, if an uncomfortable conversation comes up, that there's undue criticism or whatever towards one person, let the other one start to steer the conversation away. Little things like that. Throwing in little things like that. Try to be clear and consistent with each other about how you would like Christmas to go, how or the holidays, or do you know what? It could be anything, you know, even just a visit, you know, it doesn't have to be over the holidays. But if you're in that situation and there is someone who is toxic, whether it's family members, whether it's a friend who's on the periphery, whether it's other staff members in work, try to be clear and consistent with each other if people know what that's like. Learn to manage your expectations as well. Earlier on, when I was saying about expect some kickback, you don't expect their behavior to change. You don't expect them to suddenly become better just because maybe it's your birthday or because it's Christmas or because it's a special, wonderful occasion. You know, everyone's having a lovely time. Don't expect their behavior to change. There are still maybe going to be little digs, little jags. There might still be temper tantrums because it's not about them. So you you try to manage your expectations. Don't expect them to change. And again, you maybe try to detach emotionally. Now, one way of doing that, I think, is if you were to view their behavior rather than taking it personally, especially if it's you that they're insulting or they're having digs at or they're trying to coerce, just view their behavior as a predictable pattern. It's who they are. It's what they are. It's what they do. You just see, this is the thing about narcissism. Although it can be a very, very complex personality construct, it is very, very predictable. And the proof of that is look at how many narcissistic videos there are. Look at how many channels there are talking about it. It is a very predictable personality. So try not to take it personally. Instead, look at it as it's a predictable pattern of behavior. You know they're going to do it. They would be unable to say the dinner was nice. They will have to find something wrong with it. They will be unable to compliment you on something without it being backhanded somehow. There haven't been some passive aggressive remark there. Doesn't mean it's not going to bother you. Doesn't mean it's not going to hurt, but it can help detach from it when you just see that predictable pattern of behavior. They are just reverting to type, if you will. Try to find ways to plan your interactions strategically if you can. Now, that could involve limiting your time, because there are maybe going to be lots of people there. So whatever interactions you have, I mean, you don't deliberately have to avoid, but try to limit them, try to manage them if you can. If you need a break, I don't know, if it's your house, maybe the dog might need a walk or something, or whatever. You need to go to the bathroom for half an hour. Whatever it is, try to give yourself a little break if you can once in a while. Try to manage these things. Protect yourself emotionally as well. Again, if something does come up, there's a joke with a jag, there's a bit of sarcasm, there's asking gotcha questions, things like that, trying to do or say things to make you feel uncomfortable. Try to avoid engaging. It doesn't mean we don't answer. It doesn't mean we ignore. Sometimes a one-word answer, if that. Or sometimes what I find useful is asking a question back. Someone saying about you're this, that, and the other, you do the other. Well, when did I do that? Why would I do that? Why do you think that? Little things like that. We're not being passive aggressive. We're not trying to antagonize. We're just giving other people their own work to do. This is your stuff. This is my stuff. I'm not taking any of your stuff. Yes, I have to, and this is nice. Other than that, no, we just give them their own work to do. So we ask questions. We try not to give any personal information. Try not to give too much information. Just like that salesperson, the more you say to them, the more they will undermine that to talk you into buying it. Narcissistic people are the same. The more information you give them, the more you try to explain something, the more that's going to be used against you somehow. You think they're not listening to you. Well, sometimes they're not. They're caught up in their own little fantasy. But other times, no, they are strategically listening. They're trying to pick up certain things that they can use at a later date. So don't engage in arguments. Don't give too much personal information. And if you need to, be dull and boring. Be the grey rock. Just let things, just let the water pour off you, whatever it is. Be dull, be uninteresting. As I say, one word answers, ask questions back, respond rather than react to certain things. Something before, during, and after. If they're not just coming for the day, they might be coming for the weekend, or again, it could be a workplace situation. It could be something you're having to go into all the time. Practice things like self-care. Okay, so you prepare yourself mentally. Again, a little bit of journaling, things like that, a little bit of meditation, mindfulness, whatever it is. A little bit of interaction with healthy people, good people, decent people, people you enjoy being with, and a little bit of interaction with them. As I mentioned a moment ago, take breaks if you have to. As I say, the dog might need a walk or whatever. You might need a walk. Maybe you've just had a big, massive Christmas dinner or something. Whatever it happens to be, try to take little breaks, and afterwards find a way to decompress. Find a way to rest, to maybe shake off some of that negativity. Plan something relaxing for yourself. in advance, knowing, right, okay, they're going to go away at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, or they're going away next morning, or I'm leaving here at 5 o'clock, whatever it happens to be. Plan something nice for yourself. It doesn't have to be anything magnanimous. It could be, a treat on the way home. It could be a nice hot bath, anything, whatever it is. Could be you're going to put on that movie that you've been planning to watch for a long time, or whatever it happens to be. Something to consider as well, which probably isn't going to happen in the workplace, but if it is home and it is over the holiday period, or it is some kind of special event or whatever, try to limit alcohol consumption. First of all, alcohol does lower our inhibitions, but try to limit that. Sometimes we relax a bit too much. What I mean by limit our inhibitions, we might relax a bit too much and then get caught off guard, or we might get provoked because our sorry, my mind's just went blank. Let me take another drink. I would like to say it's only a Coke in case people think I'm on the hard stuff. Yeah. If our inhibitions are down, we've been drinking and we are get provoked, we might react a bit more emotionally, if you will. We might become a bit more aggressive, a bit more, whatever it happens to be. And again, these things could be used against us. So try to limit your alcohol consumption. And lastly, if you're in the company of someone who is just toxic and nasty, keep your focus on the things that are important, like maybe the other people and the other things that are going on. Narcissistic people tend to take up a lot of space, a lot of room. Going back to that question earlier about their entitlement, they believe they are entitled to all the attention in the room. It could be someone else's birthday, but they're the ones that, people should be celebrating them, It was something I saw on the internet once I thought was quite amusing. No one can ruin a good time more than a narcissist who isn't the center of attention. Yeah, keep your focus on the things that are important. Other people, that other person's birthday, or that other person who's opening their present, or someone else's interesting story or funny story, whatever it is you're watching on the television. Keep your focus on the healthy things in the room. Okay. So, are just a few ideas based on the questions that came up when I put this out. Trying to keep a sense of yourself when there's chaos all around you, I guess. You try to keep yourself grounded in reality. Know your own sense of reality. Know yourself. Okay, go back to that building on awareness. You could feel angry. You could feel frustrated. You could feel a lot of things. You could feel anxious. Understand why, but also look at ways to navigate that, manage that a bit better. I think what often happens is we think that person, that narcissistic person, we think they are so powerful. It's like our sense of well-being is dependent on them and how they're going to behave. Not necessarily. Again, you don't expect them to change. You don't expect them to be any different. They're just, remember those repeated patterns of behavior. Remember that predictable pattern of behavior. When you get a sense of that, there's less chance of you being blindsided. So, I hope you found this useful, and I'm going to go back to the beginning. I'm going to see what questions we've got. So, let me see, where's the pop-out chat so I can see what I'm doing. Now, if I go back to the beginning, and that says, hi, Darren, Little Freud and everyone. Little Freud is in the kitchen this evening because the past few times when I've had him up here, he's been very unsettled. I'm wondering, does he hear me talking and he wonders who and what I'm talking to and what I'm doing? He probably thinks I'm talking to him, and that's why. Well, I don't know. But he's been quite unsettled, so he's downstairs. He's in the kitchen. Ivy says, couldn't come at a better time. Well, I hope you found this evening helpful. Hello, everybody. Everybody's saying hello. Main character syndrome. That was actually a question someone asked me quite a while ago about would I talk about main character syndrome, and it's a topic I haven't got around to yet. But yeah, a lot of narcissistic people do, but main character syndrome is something else, and it's something I'm going to talk about. So where do we get to? Looking for a question. Laura says, finally made this one. Good evening. Hello, Laura. It's nice to have you here this evening. I hope you find something helpful. Could it be called gang stalking when the Narc has all of their flying monkeys coming at you during their slander campaign against you? Um, I would call that maybe mobbing. A lot of people, someone's being attacked by a lot of different people. It feels like it's coming from a lot of different directions. It's like mobbing. Um, it's like if you think of one of those things on social media, somebody posts something, and the next thing you know, there's loads of strangers attacking them. Um, so yeah, it's like mobbing. It's coming from a lot of different people, a lot of different sources. It feels like a lot of different directions, and the person feels as if they're outnumbered. So I don't know if that would be the right term, but I think mobbing would be it. So where do you go? Justice Jane says, Merry Christmas to all. Merry Christmas to you, Justice Jane. Okay. Let me see another. Let me see. Where are we? I'm looking for a question here. Everybody's saying hello. So it is nice to say hello to everybody. I'm saying hello back. Okay. May says it's challenging not to blame ourselves. I have great difficulty not fearing any enjoyment or happy feelings. If you think of the situation you were in, you may have been in a situation where anything you did enjoy might have been undermined, or you might have been led to believe that having a good time was a bad thing because they have it so tough or whatever. That's what I said earlier on about what we need to do is we need to take little small steps, little small risks. We start to live in defiance and we do things that we enjoy. We might do things that we used to enjoy. So we start doing them again, or we start finding new things. We might find new hobbies, new interests, things like that. Yeah, we if we think we're never going to enjoy anything again, that is like giving that person, whoever they were, it's like giving them the control over our own recovery. It's like our recovery is dependent on them giving us permission to enjoy ourselves. Not at all. Absolutely not. It was never theirs to begin with. Okay. Let me see. Where do we get to? Where do we get to? Looking for a question. The salesman analogy is a good one. Good. I'm saying that because you would not believe the number of people that contact me wanting to sell me things I've never heard of or need or want or could afford. And trying to get them off the phone or whatever, it's incredible. Yeah, they've decided I'm going to buy it for some reason. Yeah. Why are you being... Don't be a spanner. I love people's names on this. I love their usernames. Don't be a spanner. That is a great one. Why are you being difficult was a common phrase when saying no. Yeah, why are you being difficult? It sounds as if you're doing something wrong, doesn't it? Well, again, it really depends on you why you would answer that. If you say no, if you're being asked why are you being difficult, personally, I would just leave it hanging. If you want to see me as difficult, then fair enough, I'll be difficult. I don't need to justify myself. Let me see. Yeah, you don't get trapped into circular arguments. That's what happens. The more information you give, or the more you want from them, it just goes round and round. It's nonsensical. It's illogical. It makes no sense. It's circular. You drive yourself insane trying to make sense of things that do not make sense. Where do we get to? Like different things. Good evening to you as well. S. Thomas says narcissists just love ruining the holidays. Really depends on the person. Yeah, they do. I think it's the thing about narcissism. It can be very destructive in the sense that you will get those who will destroy things because they just love chaos. But then you will get those who will destroy things trying to make things perfect. It's like perfection is amazing to them. And if it doesn't, and the thing about perfection is it's just whatever version is in their head at that moment. And they cause a lot of stress and a lot of chaos because things aren't the way they want them to be. So where do we get to? Yeah, you don't give them ammunition against you. Jenny says, learn how to say implacable. A good word that helps. Okay. Christine says, I don't like debate of provocative questions. I think few people do. To be honest, I think few people do, could be why they're asked. The aim could be in some situations, like gotcha questions, the aim is to put someone on the back foot, to have them almost apologize for themselves and so on. Oh, where did we get to? Just jumped all over the shop. Where did we get to? Ellie says, excellent advice, Darren. Oh, it's good. I'm glad you find it helpful. That's the important thing. I've missed it. Right, I'm back where I am now. Yes. They're always insulting. Yeah, can't be on my way. Linus of Guy says, I struggle with dissociation. As I said, there was a video that I'd put out on that. It's just, if you find that helpful, I think I was more outlining what it is. There may be a few, it was quite a while ago from I done it, so I can't remember what's in it. There may be some tips and advice, I'm not sure. But like I said earlier on, dissociation doesn't necessarily mean we're weak or we lack intelligence or anything. It is our brain trying to protect us in a lot of ways. That being said, sometimes our defense mechanisms, they're not necessarily appropriate to the situation. I guess I'd put it that way. But yeah, have a look and see if there's anything you would find interesting in that video. That being said, there's probably other people. If it's just videos you want to look at, by the way, there's probably other people on YouTube have put out more in-depth stuff. If you want to learn a bit more. But that being said, as I always say to everyone, a good place to start is therapy. Go and see a counselor. Go and see a therapist to help you with it. Yeah, our senses are up when we drink. Our inhibitions are down. We relax a lot more, I guess. Jenny again says the reaction is what they are depending on for their fuel. Remain implacable. There's that word again. Yeah, you're right. The reaction is often what they're depending on. They'll use it somehow. It'll feed them somehow. Okay, so where do we get to? Joke of the week, DFM. Why did the codependent cross the road? Because for you, he'd do anything. Daz Pierce, thank you very much for the joke. If I can think of a good joke, I'll share one before we finish. I think I told people my surrealist joke, didn't I? Yeah, probably did. Someone mentioned in the comments if I told you it. If I didn't tell you the surrealist joke, then I will tell you it at the end of the live stream. It's my favorite joke. It always makes me laugh. Where do we get to? Record Hound. Hi, Darren. Rare to appear here on Sundays. I'll be missing the Christmas this year. Had a bad year and I don't want to be the focus of that attention. It's nice to see you this evening, Record Hound. I'm glad you could make it. Again, sometimes that is an option. Sometimes distance is the option. Sometimes it is the answer. It is your choice. Again, it's like I always say, as long as someone is aware of what they're doing, they're honest with themselves, one way or another, I do hope you have a good Christmas. Whatever you decide to do, wherever it is you go. Night 20, not 22, night in a series of numbers. Hello, Darren. Even though the narcissist is illogical, no one in the family says a word. Well, again, that's often why people behave the way they do, because no one says anything. And sometimes no one says anything because it's been normalized. It's just who they are. It's what they do. It's just accepted. Some people don't say anything for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they don't say anything because they know it's not going to go anywhere. So there can be a variety of reasons for that, no matter how illogical they are. So coming towards the end, coming up to 9 o'clock. Let me see, get some more questions here. If they are miserable, they want you to be miserable. Yeah, I would agree. It's there's a very competitive nature to narcissism. They don't like people feeling better than them, but then if people are feeling worse, well, they might feel good about themselves because, yeah, I'm superior here. But also, if someone is feeling bad, that competitive nature, they would have to have a worse story. So there is a competitive nature. And if you're right, if they are miserable, they are not pleased for anybody else who isn't miserable. What they tend to want is people to join them in their misery. It's very common with what you have covert narcissism, or they're like emotional hoovers sometimes, or emotional vacuum cleaners, whatever term you want to use. They just want to suck all the joy out of the room. So let me see, get some questions. Pushes you to grow. Great info as usual. Thank you, Kay. I'm glad you found that helpful. Come back and stand in who you are. From Daphnix, if I've pronounced that right, which I probably haven't. I butcher people's names, even though I think it's very interesting and creative. Yeah, I would say be the best version of yourself. Be the authentic version of yourself. The thing about being authentic, it's the very thing that narcissism isn't. Narcissism is based on a very false premise that they are amazing, that they are special, that they are superior, that they are entitled. There's little authenticity to it. Being authentic is being honest with yourself and being honest with other people. You are flawed, but you're also funny. You're also intelligent. You're also smart, but you also feel fear. There are things that you do not know. There are things that you cannot manage. There are things that you do not understand. Just being honest with yourself. I think that's a good antidote to narcissism. Just being authentic. Let me see. Sanara says, thank you for being here for so many people. It's been a huge learning experience for this entire year. Appreciate your channel. So now that's a lovely thing to say. I really appreciate that. I'm so glad that you find it helpful. That's the important thing. Alexandra asks, does narcissism and autism go hand in hand? They have many traits in common. This was my experience. I do not know enough about autism to be able to comment on that, but what I will say is quite often you can see similar patterns of behavior, but the motivation is very different. Like people with narcissism would lack empathy. They either don't understand or they don't care about what other people feel. Someone with autism might lack empathy, but they might not understand what other people feel. But that could actually cause them some distress because they don't understand and because they might miss things like social cues. So what you would see is a lack of empathy with both, but they're two different things. You find, in fact, you could find with a lot of behaviors and a lot of things across a spectrum of humanity, you will find a lot of similar things, but different motivations behind it. Tomorrow, the video that I'm putting out tomorrow is from a question I got a few months ago about narcissism and addiction. So what I did is I thought I would do something. I hope I've done something different. I haven't watched anybody else's videos on this, so I can't say for sure. But I hope I'm taking a different slant on this, because what I'm looking at are the similarities with narcissism and addiction, but I'm also looking at the differences. The differences are usually in the motivations and so on. I'm also going to look at what happens when a narcissistic person has an addiction, and the difference between when it comes to recovery or quitting an addiction, going into recovery, the difference between someone who has narcissism and someone who doesn't, the different things that can happen there. So I'm saying that because, as I say, yes, there can be a lot of things that are similar And it might look the same, but remember the motivations and things behind the behavior could be very different, which is why it can be sometimes difficult to discern. So let me see. Sunflower Soul says, wisdom is your best friend in the midst. Helps feed faith and hope. Wisdom is, absolutely. And wisdom comes from knowledge and experience. Yeah, absolutely. Always remember hearing somebody arguing with their teenage kid at the time. It's good a lot of years ago. I was in someone's house and he had a 15-year-old who, like all 15-year-olds, knows everything in the world, and dad is prehistoric and doesn't know anything. What my friend said to his kid, I thought this was really interesting. He says, look, I know you're smarter than me, but you don't have my experience and you don't have my wisdom. You need to listen. And that just stopped the young guy in his tracks. I thought that was a really good way. I thought that was a really good answer to him, a really good way to get him to listen. Yeah, again, my mind wanders, doesn't it? Where do we get to? Looking for questions. See, every time someone questions, this jumps and I have to go back to the beginning. Where do we get to? Oh, yeah, see them for who they are, don't play. Sometimes it's authentic to say, I'm not fit for human consumption. I'm not sure what I'll read into that. I would like to say that I'm not fit for human consumption either, in the sense that I don't want humans consuming me. If you know what I mean? I'm not. I don't know if I've understood that or not, record, but okay. Where do we get to? When a person with NPD cannot secure consistent supply, they dive deeper into addiction to cope. Yeah, you think of an addiction. This is a while ago. I have a podcast out. If you want to listen, I was talking to Dr. Darren Haber. He's a therapist, a fellow therapist. He works with addiction a lot. And we were looking at addiction and how addiction is often it's a way of like numbing something. It's like a maladaptive coping strategy. It's a way of escaping one feeling for another. For instance, I don't want to feel sad. I want to feel happy. I don't want to feel weak. I want to feel powerful. And when you get a narcissistic person, narcissistic people, and I mentioned this in the video tomorrow, narcissistic people have a very instant gratification kind of personality. It's always sensation seeking. No, that's more psychopathy. It's more reward seeking, if you know what I mean. An instant gratification. So it's not uncommon for them to do things that give them instant gratification, whether that's smoking or whatever it happens to be, drinking or whatever. And we do things, if you will, let's imagine it's alcohol. We will take alcohol. Sometimes not is taking alcohol. It's like an anesthetic for their pain or whatever. It could also be, in terms of narcissism, it could also be the drink helps them manage their social anxiety or whatever. So they feel a bit braver, a bit more grandiose and things like that. There's a lot of different reasons behind it. But yes, sometimes if they don't have a consistent supply, different kind of addictions can come up. So let me see where I get to. The motivation is the difference. Thanks. Yeah, it is. The motivation is the difference. Sometimes it looks the same, behavior looks the same, but what's behind the behavior could be different. Well, let me put it to you this way. Imagine if someone agreed to do something for you, to do you a favor, and they don't do it. Now, we could just say they're a narcissist because they said they would do something they didn't. They're a liar. That makes them a narcissist. Well, they could be narcissistic. And the reason why they're not doing it is because no one's in control of them. It's up to them. They said it at that time, but, because of their whims and the way their moods change, and you might have looked at them the wrong way or something, they've changed their mind. So they've let you down. So it could be that. Or someone could maybe have an anxiety disorder. They could be struggling with anxiety. And the very thing they said that they would do for you has brought up a lot of stress and strain for them, a lot of panic. They're worrying about what's going to happen and so on. And so they back down at the last minute. So they've let you down that way. So Do you know what I mean? There can be different things. Someone could perhaps have borderline personality and they agree to do something, but um, again, something happens. They're unable to regulate how they feel. There's a lot of anger there, intense anger, so they don't do it. They've let you down, but then afterwards they start to beat themselves up because the fear that you're going to reject them, you're going to abandon them. So there can be different motivations behind um, the different the same behavior. There can be different behaviors. Happy Monday says cannibalism humor at its finest. Okay. Let me see. Got it. Record Hand says, in other words, it's authentic to know when I'm not in good enough shape to deal with other people. Can be. We're being honest with ourselves, but we also need to be honest with ourselves as to why we're not in good enough shape. And also being able to ask ourselves, what would I need to be able to be in good enough shape? What would good enough shape look like? Again, so we're tapping into our authenticity, but we're also tapping into our resourcefulness and our resilience. Say, with much more going on for us than sometimes we give ourselves credit for. Let's see. So that's pretty much it. I'm coming to the end. It's just after 9 o'clock. I think I've covered all the questions. It's really, really nice this evening. It's good. Kind of waffled a bit, but glad that you found it helpful. So, I may have told this joke already, so if you want, I will share it with you. It is my favorite joke. It makes me laugh still, and I heard it about 20 years ago. And the question is, how many surrealists does it take to change a light bulb? A fish. I still love that joke. Listen, thanks for joining me, everyone. I will hopefully see you again next week at the same time. It's going to be 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock on the Sunday night. As I say, tomorrow, the videos coming out about the narcissism, the addiction, the similarities, the differences, and so on. I've also got a conversation coming out I had with a filmmaker called Kaz McGovern. She's got a movie out. It's actually showing. It's on YouTube at the moment. So I'm talking with her, talking about her journey. She has a diagnosis of bipolar type 2. Really interesting person. Really interesting conversation. She talks about the bipolar, but what you'll find is she doesn't let it define her. She doesn't let it hold her back. The movie is a good one. It's called They Don't Leave. It is on YouTube. I will put links to it when I put the conversation out. What else do I have coming up? I can't remember. Oh yes, the video on how to manage those difficult interactions, those gotcha questions, and those weaponized accusations. That is definitely coming out this week. I've got my bullet points ready. All I need to do is record it. So I need a kick in the backside to do that. So that will be coming out as well. After Christmas, I will be talking, if anyone remembers, a few years ago, I think it was about 2 years ago by now. Have I been doing this that long? Wow. About 2 years ago, I was on Tegan Osmond's channel. I'm going to be talking with her again. I'm going to be talking to her in the new year. We're going to have another conversation. Let me see what else there's other stuff, and I was meant to talk about it. You know what? By the time I've switched off, I'm going to remember. But anyway, stuff coming up anyway. So a couple of videos during the week, conversation coming up next week. And if I don't see you before it, I will see you all next week at 8 o'clock again. Thanks again, everyone. Take care.